The hall was glowing, laughter echoing, champagne glasses clinking. My daughter looked radiant, her fiancé charming, and I was just proud. After years of raising her alone, this engagement party felt like a reward for all the sacrifices. But right as her fiancé took the mic for a toast, something shifted. He began with warmth, thanking me for my love and guidance, then paused. What followed wasn't a joke or a romantic cliché. It was a confession. A truth she had hidden from me for years, one that shook every guest in the room and made me question everything. Before we dive deeper, tell me, what would you do if someone revealed a secret about your child in front of 150 guests? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if you enjoy stories of shocking truths, emotional twists, and unforgettable moments, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon. The day had started like a dream. My daughter Sana had been glowing since the moment she slipped the ring on her finger 2 months ago. She and her fiancé, Ammon, had fallen in love so quickly, yet so deeply, that even I, her overprotective single mother, couldn't help but feel at peace with her choice. Ammon was kind, thoughtful, and respectful. From the first dinner he attended at our home, he treated me like family. In fact, he insisted I call him Beta, which warmed my heart more than he could ever know. After everything I'd been through raising Sana alone, working double shifts, skipping meals to pay for her school fees, and hiding my tears behind closed doors, this felt like my reward. My little girl had grown up, and she had found someone who loved her like she deserved. The engagement party was set at a heritage banquet hall we'd rented for the evening. With lanterns hanging from the ceiling, fairy lights wrapped around tall indoor plants, and soft violin music humming in the background, the entire place looked like it had been pulled out of a dream. I had worn a pale blue silk sari, one that my late mother had gifted me before she passed, as I walked around greeting guests, many of whom had seen Sana grow from a shy child to a graceful woman. I couldn't stop smiling. Everyone congratulated me with the same warmth. You've raised her so well, Meher. Such elegance, such intelligence. You must be proud. Your sacrifices show, sister. And every time I heard those words, I'd glance toward Sana, laughing with Ammon across the room, and feel my chest tighten. Not with pain, but with something close to awe. But even then, there was something odd I couldn't put my finger on. It started with how Ammon had looked at me when we met at the entrance. He hugged me, yes, and called me Ammy, like he always did, but there was a nervousness behind his smile, as if he was about to take a test. He kept adjusting his collar, fidgeting with his watch. I had chalked it up to beach jitters. After all, he had planned to give a toast tonight. Maybe he was just overwhelmed, but that unease stayed with him through the night. As dinner was served and guests settled into their seats, Ammon gently clinked his fork against his glass. The room fell into a hush, and all eyes turned toward him. Sana smiled up at him like he was the only man in the world. He cleared his throat, raised his glass, and began his speech. To all the friends, family, and loved ones gathered here tonight, thank you. This night is not just about me and Sana. It's about every person who helped build us into who we are today. And there's one person in particular who deserves more than just a thank you. He looked straight at me. My heart fluttered. Auntie Meher, he said softly, or should I say, Ammy, you've raised Sana with a strength that few possess. And over the past year, I've come to see how that strength lives in everything she does. From the way she speaks, to the way she carries burdens, to the way she hides pain. I frowned slightly. Hides pain, he continued. When I first met Sana, I was drawn to her energy, her warmth. But as we grew closer, I started to see there was a wall behind her confidence, a hesitation, a fear. It took a long time for her to tell me why. A few guests shifted in their chairs. Sana's smile began to twitch. Ammon's voice dropped slightly. Sana told me about a part of her past that not even you, Ammy, know about. The air in the room thinned, my stomach dropped. She asked me not to tell anyone, but tonight, I believe she deserves freedom, not just celebration. Sana's eyes widened. She reached for his arm, whispering, Ammon, please. But he gently squeezed her hand and shook his head. He turned back to the crowd. Sana has carried a secret for over 10 years. One that has shaped the way she loves, the way she trusts, and the way she looks at this world. And she has carried it alone. My hands turned cold. My fingers locked around my sari's edge as I waited, bracing myself. Ammon finally said it. Sana was bullied for years, at school, at college, even during her internship. She was called names, mocked for her appearance, cornered in restrooms, laughed at in lectures. She begged teachers for help, but was told to ignore it. She cried at home in silence, afraid that if she told you, it would make her a disappointment in your eyes, that you'd think she was weak. A ripple of gasps moved through the guests. Some whispered, others stared. I sat frozen. She didn't want to be your burden, so she hid the years of torment behind her smile, behind her good grades, behind her ambitions. I turned toward Sana. Her eyes were glossy, her lips trembling. She couldn't meet my gaze. And yet, Ammon said, lifting her hand and holding it close to his chest, here she stands, not broken, not bitter, but stronger than ever, because she turned her pain into fuel. She forgave those who never apologized. She used her wounds as wings, and I've never loved anyone more. A silence fell again. A long, deep, breathtaking silence, then soft claps, one, then two, then a full wave of applause. People stood. I remained seated, eyes locked on my daughter. My heart ached, not in anger, not in disappointment, but in heartbreak for what she had suffered, and guilt for not seeing it. All those nights she came home tired. All those mornings she insisted everything's fine, and I believed her. She finally looked at me. Her eyes brimmed with tears. She mouthed, "I'm sorry." I stood slowly, walked across the room to her, and without a word, wrapped her in the tightest embrace. She broke into a sob, burying her face into my shoulder like she was 5 years old again. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you," she whispered. "I'm sorry I didn't see it," I replied. The applause resumed, not for the speech this time, but for the reunion, the healing, the bond that had been shaken, but not broken. That night didn't go the way I had expected. It wasn't a fairy tale. It was something deeper, something real. Ammon hadn't embarrassed her. He had liberated her, and in doing so, he had given me back a version of my daughter I didn't know I was missing. But even as I held her close, one thought lingered in my mind. Why didn't she trust me enough to tell me back then? If someone had told me that my daughter's engagement party would feel like the most emotional night of my life, more than her birth, more than my husband leaving, more than any hardship I'd ever endured, I would have laughed. But that's exactly what it became. The night started like a celebration and ended like a reckoning. After Ammon's unexpected toast exposed a decade-old secret, the walls between me and Sana, the ones I didn't know existed, came crashing down in front of 150 people and a room full of half-eaten desserts. Even as I hugged her tightly in front of everyone, I could feel how much pain she had stored up behind that brilliant smile of hers. When I pulled back, I looked into her tearful eyes, searching for the little girl I raised, only to realize she'd been carrying this burden alone for far too long. There were no angry outbursts, no blame, just a heavy silence that said everything. I didn't want to hurt you. The rest of the evening blurred into background noise. The cake cutting happened, laughter resumed, the music played on, but none of it reached me. My body stayed present, but my mind traveled far back, to the nights I stayed up sewing clothes to afford her school fees, to her sudden shift in personality around middle school, when she stopped dancing in the living room, when she stopped telling me about her school friends. I had noticed the changes, of course, but I had assumed it was teenage moodiness, growing up, exam stress. Never once had I considered that she was being bullied, humiliated, broken down day after day. And that she didn't come to me, not because she didn't love me, but because she thought I was already carrying too much. When we got home that night, neither of us said much. I made her some warm milk with honey, the way I used to when she had trouble sleeping. She sat curled up on the sofa, eyes still red, fingers fidgeting with the edge of her scarf. I joined her and placed the cup in her hands. Then, in a quiet voice, I asked, "Why didn't you tell me, Beta?" She looked at me with such guilt, It nearly shattered me. Because I didn't want you to feel like you failed. I didn't even realize I had started crying until I felt a tear drop on my hand. Failed? I whispered. You were the only reason I kept going. I would have fought the whole world if I knew what they were doing to you. I know, Amma. She replied softly. That's exactly why I didn't say anything. You already fought so many battles for me. I didn't want to give you one more. That sentence lived in my chest like a storm. I had worked so hard to be a strong, dependable mother. But in doing so, had I made her believe that her pain was a burden I couldn't carry? She continued to talk, slowly at first, then more freely, about the girl who spread rumors that she had no father, the boy who pulled her chair away in class, the time someone stole her lunch every day and left cruel notes in its place. She even told me how she once pretended to faint during an assembly just to escape the constant whispers, and all of it, all that agony, she carried alone. I listened. I didn't interrupt. I let her bleed those memories out like poison, and when she was done, I pulled her into my arms and said the only thing I could. You are the strongest person I know. Over the next few days, something shifted between us. There was no more pretending. She came into the kitchen in the morning while I cooked and told me stories about her therapy sessions. She opened up about how Ammon helped her build her confidence again, how he encouraged her to stand up to the voices in her head that still echoed the bully's taunts. I hadn't realized how much of her healing had already begun, silently, away from me. And instead of feeling hurt, I felt thankful. Thankful that she had someone in her life who not only loved her, but understood the value of her pain. One evening, about a week after the engagement party, Ammon came over with his parents for a family dinner. I wasn't sure how I'd feel facing him after his public revelation, but when I opened the door and saw his nervous smile, my heart softened. He was trying, and the truth was, he had done what I hadn't been able to. He had given her voice a platform. Over dinner, he apologized gently if his speech caused any embarrassment. Not embarrassment. I corrected him. It was a necessary wound. Sometimes healing doesn't begin until someone tears off the bandage. His mother nodded quietly. She's brave just like her mother. Later that night, after the dishes were cleared and the guests had left, Ammon stayed behind for a moment. He handed me a small box. Inside was a necklace, a delicate gold pendant shaped like a quill. She said you used to write poetry. He smiled. My hand froze on the box. That was a part of my life I hadn't touched in years. She wants you to start again, he added. She says you used to be happiest when you were writing. Tears welled in my eyes. Somehow, in healing her, they were now healing me too. That night, I dug through my old wooden trunk and pulled out my dusty journal. I flipped through the pages filled with ink-stained verses from a much younger Meher. And for the first time in decades, I wrote again. She bloomed with scars across her soul, a fire wrapped in silk and gold. The world had tried to dim her light, but she turned pain into silent might. I read the words aloud. Sana, standing in the doorway, smiled. It's beautiful, she whispered. We stayed up till midnight that night. She told me about the wedding plans, how she wanted to wear a traditional green lehenga, how she wanted a dalki night just for women, how she wanted me to sing again, and I agreed to everything. Not because I wanted to make up for lost time, but because I finally understood the daughter I had raised. But beneath the warmth of our growing bond, there was something else, a question that slowly began to grow in my heart. What happened to those people who hurt her? Did they move on like nothing happened? Did they ever realize the damage they caused? And more importantly, what would I do if one of them suddenly showed up now, after all these years? A week passed after the engagement party, but the ripple of that night's revelation continued to shape our daily lives in quiet, powerful ways. Sana and I found ourselves talking more openly than we had in years, about her childhood, her fears, her dreams, and the pain she had tucked away beneath layers of strength. I was learning things about my daughter that no school report card, no birthday photo, no polite conversation had ever revealed. But while our relationship was healing, a storm was brewing quietly in the background. It started one morning over breakfast. Sana had come into the kitchen late, still in her robe, with a sleepy smile and a wedding planning notebook in her hand. I was stirring the dal on the stove when she casually mentioned, "Oh, by the way, you might get a call from someone named Manor." I turned, frowning. Who's Monor? She hesitated. She was one of the girls from college. We were in the same dorm. I haven't spoken to her in years. I didn't press further then, but something about her tone unsettled me. The name felt like a loose thread dangling from a carefully folded sheet, innocent on the surface, but a tug might unravel everything. Later that evening, I got a Facebook friend request from Monor Siddiqui. The name immediately clicked, and I instinctively opened her profile. There she was. Big designer sunglasses, vacation photos in Istanbul, captions that screamed curated perfection. Nothing about her digital presence said bully. But then again, very few monsters ever advertised their cruelty. I scrolled through her posts until I reached the comment section on one of her selfies. And that's when I saw it. Ammon had liked it. It was from months ago, before the engagement. Still, my stomach tightened. Sana walked into the room and paused when she saw my expression. You saw her profile, didn't you? I did. I admitted. She sat down, suddenly more guarded. She messaged me yesterday. What did she want? She said she saw the pictures from the engagement party, that I looked happy, and that she hoped there were no hard feelings. I stared at her. No hard feelings. After everything. Sana didn't respond. Her silence said enough. Then she added quietly, she asked if she could come to the wedding. That was when I lost it. Absolutely not. Sana reached across the table, placing her hand on mine. Amma, I know how you feel, but I've made peace with her. I forgave her years ago, not for her sake, but for mine, holding on to all that hate. It was eating me alive. Her words were gentle, but I wasn't ready to hear them. Not yet, not when my mind was still caught in the image of my daughter crying silently in a bathroom stall, alone, humiliated, while this same Monor now wanted to smile, eat biryani, and dance at her mehndi like nothing ever happened. I nodded slowly, but inside I felt a fire igniting. 2 days later, we were out shopping for wedding day, or when fate decided to test me. As we stepped out of a boutique on Zamzama, I saw her Monor across the street. She was with another girl, laughing, phone in hand, just like the profile photos. But when she saw Sana, her laughter stopped. She waved, walked over casually, and greeted her like an old friend. Sana, you look stunning, mashallah. Monor gushed, hugging her like they were childhood besties. Sana stiffened slightly, but hugged back. I saw your engagement post. Your fiancé is such a catch. And that speech, everyone's been talking about it. My ears perked up. Everyone. Monor turned to me. You must be her mother. I've heard so much about you. Ammon always says you're the strongest woman he's met. I raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Sana made polite small talk and tried to pull away. But before we could leave, Monor leaned in and said, You know, I was thinking, it might be nice to catch up properly sometime. Maybe over chai, you and me, clear the air. I finally spoke. The air was never cloudy for me. But if you'd like to clear your conscience, perhaps a chai is overdue. Her smile faltered for a split second before she regained her composure. I'll message you. We walked away, and Sana sighed the moment we got into the car. You didn't have to say that, Amma. Yes, I did. I replied firmly. She might have rewritten her past, but I haven't. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake thinking of how easily people like Monor moved on. How they pretended that cruelty was just a phase, a mistake of youth. But the wounds they left behind didn't age the same way. They stayed fresh in the hearts of those they hurt. So I made a decision. I called Monor the next morning. She answered, surprised but cheerful. Auntie Meher, how lovely to hear from you. I'd like to meet, I said, not for chai, for closure. She agreed, and we met that evening at a quiet cafe tucked behind a bookstore. She wore designer heels, an expensive fragrance, and that same rehearsed smile. I came with a notebook. Before you say anything, she began, I just want you to know. I've changed. I'm not that girl anymore. I was immature, insecure, and I've done a lot of work to grow since then. I nodded slowly. That's good, but do you know what you were to my daughter? She paused. I know I wasn't kind. You weren't kind, I repeated. You were relentless. You chipped away at her spirit piece by piece. You made her believe she was unlovable, And then you had the audacity to act like it was all just childish mischief." Monor looked down, fidgeting. "She cried herself to sleep. She questioned her worth. She kept her pain from me so I wouldn't be burdened. And now you want an invitation to her happiness." "I'm not asking for that," she murmured. "I just wanted to make things right." "Then say it," I challenged. "Say what you did. Own it, fully." She swallowed. "I bullied Sana. I was jealous. I mocked her, spread rumors, made her life miserable, and I did it because I felt small. She was kind, beautiful, and smart, and I couldn't stand that someone like her existed while I hated myself." The cafe was silent. A few tears rolled down her cheeks. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I believed her, but forgiveness didn't mean access. You'll stay away from the wedding." I said firmly, "That's her sacred space. You don't get to be part of it. But I hope your apology was genuine, for your own soul." Monor nodded. When I left, I felt something release inside me, not vengeance, not victory, but a quiet calm. I couldn't erase the past, but I could guard my daughter's future. That night, Sana asked how it went. She apologized. I said simply, "But she won't be at the wedding." Sana looked at me for a long moment. Then she came over, wrapped her arms around me, and whispered, "Thank you for standing up for the version of me who couldn't." And in that moment, I knew we were both healing. Not perfectly, not all at once, but finally together. Just when I thought the past had been laid to rest, it found another way to rise again, unexpected, uninvited, and ready to test every ounce of resolve I had built since that unforgettable engagement night. The weeks following my confrontation with Monor were surprisingly peaceful. Sana and I had reached a new understanding, one layered with transparency, forgiveness, and love. We had our differences, like when she insisted on inviting a few distant relatives I didn't trust, or when I objected to her idea of a beach photo shoot for the wedding. But those were normal. For once, our disagreements came from joy, not hurt. But that joy was fragile. It didn't take much to shake it. The disturbance came of all places through a wedding vendor. Sana and I were meeting the decorator in a small cafe in Clifton to finalize floral themes when she suddenly froze mid-sentence. I followed her gaze across the cafe and saw a young man, all striking with a smug confidence in his stride, ordering coffee with two friends. At first, I didn't understand her reaction, but then she whispered, "That's him." I looked back at her. "Who?" She blinked rapidly, her voice tight. "Harris." I had never heard that name before, but from the way her breath caught and her jaw clenched, I didn't need context to understand. "He's one of the worst," she said quietly. "He used to corner me in the computer lab, called me charity case in front of everyone, even recorded a video once where he made me cry and then sent it to a WhatsApp group." I felt my pulse spike. Before I could even process my next move, Harris turned and noticed us. He hesitated for a moment, then smirked and walked over. "Sana, wow, it's been, 5 years?" His tone was casual, too casual. Sana didn't speak. Her lips tightened, her eyes staring past him like he wasn't even real. "I saw your engagement post." He continued, completely ignoring her discomfort. "Congrats, the guy seems loaded, good catch." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I stood up slowly, placing both palms on the table to steady myself. "You need to walk away," I said firmly. He looked at me, clearly amused. "And you are." "I'm the mother of the woman you used to humiliate." His eyebrows lifted slightly. He chuckled. "Relax, Auntie. That was college stuff, just jokes. Everyone does it." "No," I said coldly. "Everyone doesn't. Only cowards need to belittle others to feel powerful." He shrugged. "Well, look at her now. Turned out fine, didn't she?" I wanted to throw my hot tea in his face. Instead, I clenched my fists under the table and forced myself to stay still. Sana finally spoke. Her voice was flat. "Leave Harris now." For a brief second, I saw a flicker of surprise on his face, like he hadn't expected her to speak up. He scoffed and walked away, throwing a dismissive "good luck with the wedding" over his shoulder. We sat in silence after that. The air felt suffocating. Sana's hands trembled as she picked up her phone. "I need to go," she said. "I'll call Ammon." I nodded, watching her leave, heart breaking all over again. She had come so far, rebuilt herself piece by piece, and yet one encounter with a ghost from the past could still unearth all that buried pain. I didn't go home. Instead, I took a cab to Amon's office. I knew he would still be working. He often stayed late, especially with the wedding drawing near and new projects piling up. He was surprised to see me, but welcomed me in without hesitation. I told him everything, from Manor's apology to Hara's reappearance. Amon sat in silence for a while, processing it all. Then he asked one question. "Do you think she'd want me to step in?" I shook my head. "She doesn't need protection. She needs empowerment. But that doesn't mean Haris gets to just walk around, smug and untouched." Amon looked thoughtful, then said something that surprised me. He applied for a job here last month. I stared at him. "What? Yeah, different department, but same company." HR forwarded me his resume for feedback. I didn't realize he had a connection to Sana. Something dark stirred inside me, and now, he smiled faintly. "Now I do." That evening he went home and talked to Sana. I don't know the details of their conversation, but the next morning he forwarded the email to HR with a simple line, "Not recommended for hire." It should have ended there. But Haris wasn't the type to take rejection quietly. 2 days later, Sana received a message from an unknown number. A screenshot of her old college ID photo, shopped with nasty comments written on it. No words, just the image. It was cruel, childish, and calculated to inflict pain. Sana didn't show it to me until the weekend. By then, she'd already blocked the number and reported it, but the damage had been done. I saw the way her hands gripped her coffee mug tighter, the way her eyes darted around in public, the way she stopped checking social media, afraid to see what might be lurking. I sat her down and said, "It's time to stop letting them live rent free in your life." She looked at me. "What do you mean?" "I mean we do what they never expected. We take control of the story." And so we did. With Amon's help, we arranged for a closed-door gathering, just close family and friends, a pre-wedding event, but different. Not about Mehndi or music, about truth. Sana agreed to share her story, not out of vengeance, but out of victory. That night, she stood in a hall of people who loved her. With no notes, no rehearsed lines, she began to speak. Her voice trembled at first, but as the room grew quieter, she grew stronger. "I spent years thinking my pain made me weak," she said. "But now I know, surviving it made me unbreakable." She spoke of Manor, of Haris, of teachers who failed her, and a system that turned a blind eye. She didn't name names, but her message was clear. She was done being silent, and then she looked at me, and to my mother. She said, her voice soft, "Thank you for being my shelter, even when I didn't know how to ask for help." I couldn't hold my tears. That night, something shifted permanently, not just in Sana, but in every person who heard her. Her story wasn't just a confession. It was a call to arms for everyone who had ever been silenced. And as for Haris, well, Amon forwarded the speech video, now going viral, to every major HR head in the industry. Quietly, discreetly, effectively, let him laugh now. A week after Sana's powerful speech, the house felt like it was finally breathing again, not just alive with wedding excitement, but with something deeper, freedom. Sana's mood was lighter, her steps more confident, and even the way she interacted with Amon had shifted. There was no longer a trace of that girl who second-guessed her own worth. She was fully herself now, unapologetically. But the universe, as it often does, doesn't let such peace settle for long without one final test. The final wedding dress fitting was scheduled for Sunday afternoon, and Sana insisted we all go. Amon, me, her best friend Huda, and her younger cousin who had flown in from Lahore. It was meant to be a light day, full of laughter and last-minute selfies. The boutique, a luxurious white and gold space near Defense, was bustling with brides-to-be. Sana stepped into the fitting room, and we waited on velvet chairs near the long run-way-style mirror. That's when I saw her, Manor. I did a double take, certain my mind was playing tricks. But it was her, standing near a different rack of dresses with 2 women I didn't recognize. Her hair was swept into a sleek bun, and she wore a smug sort of calm, the kind you only carry when you think you've escaped the consequences of your past. She hadn't seen us yet. I glanced at Huda, who noticed my change in expression. "Everything okay?" she whispered, Before I could respond, Sana stepped out of the fitting room. She was radiant, the moment froze, like something out of a movie. Her soft ivory lehenga shimmered under the warm lights. Her earrings sparkled, her eyes held depth and calm. But when her gaze landed on Manor, everything changed. Their eyes locked. Manor blinked, visibly thrown off, then forced a smile and walked straight toward us. As she approached, I could feel Sana stiffen. Amon moved slightly closer. "Wow," Manor said lightly. "You look amazing, Sana." Like, breathtaking. Sana stayed silent, her arms folded. Manor glanced around awkwardly, then laughed. "I didn't expect to run into you here. My cousin's getting married too. Funny how life works, huh?" Sana finally spoke. Her voice was composed. "Funny, I think it's exhausting." Manor frowned. "Excuse me." Sana took a slow breath. "All my life, you've shown up when I least wanted you to. Back then, it was in classrooms, in dorms, in whispers and rumors. Now it's in wedding shops. But the outcome is always the same. I leave with less peace." Manor's face flushed. "Look, I already apologized." Sana nodded. "You did, and I appreciated it. But apology without accountability is just noise." People nearby had started to notice. A hush fell over the boutique. Manor glanced around nervously, realizing she had no control over this moment. "I've changed," she said, voice lower. "Then prove it." Sana replied, stepping forward, "Because right now, all I see is someone trying to erase their past instead of owning it." Manor opened her mouth, but no words came. "You want to come to my wedding?" Sana asked. "Then let's test that growth. I want you to tell these women here," she gestured around the boutique, "what you did to me. Go on. Tell them about the time you locked me in the washroom during the group project, about the names, about the rumor you started about me dating the teacher, about the photo you edited and shared on the university Facebook page." The room had fallen silent. Manor paled. I didn't think, no," Sana interrupted. "You didn't think then, and you're still not thinking now." I watched with pride swelling in my chest. This was no longer about vengeance. This was power reclaimed. Sana wasn't raising her voice, but her truth echoed louder than any scream. Manor turned to leave, embarrassed, but just before she stepped away, she looked at me. "You're her mother. Surely you don't want this drama." I stood up. My daughter is wearing a wedding dress, standing in her full light, facing the person who tried to snuff it out. I said, "If you see that as drama, that says more about you than it does about us." With that, Manor walked out, clutching her handbag like it was a lifeline. The boutique slowly resumed its atmosphere, but something in the room had shifted. A few women came up to Sana quietly, sharing small nods or words of support. One woman whispered, "You're brave. My sister went through something similar." Back in the car, none of us said much for a while. The silence was heavy, but it wasn't uncomfortable, it was satisfying. Then Huda spoke from the back seat. "You know what's crazy? She probably thought she'd get away with everything forever." Sana smiled faintly. "They usually do." Amon reached over and took her hand. But not this time. That night, Sana posted a photo of her in the boutique, wearing the ivory lehenga, arms outstretched, head tilted toward the ceiling like she was flying. The caption read, "They called me too sensitive, too weak, too emotional. But those things saved me. Those things became my armor. And today, I get married not with scars, but with strength stitched into every thread of my story." The post exploded. Hundreds of likes, dozens of comments. Old classmates messaged her privately. Some apologized, some shared their own trauma. Some admitted they had seen the bullying and done nothing, and that they still carried guilt for it. Sana responded to everyone with grace, but one message stood out. It was from Haris. I watched the speech. He wrote, "And today, someone forwarded me your boutique moment. I've been thinking a lot. I can't undo what I did. I can't erase the fact that I hurt you. But I see now what you've become, and I'm ashamed of who I was." Sana read it silently, then showed it to me. "Do I reply?" she asked. "No." I said gently, "Some apologies aren't meant to be accepted. They're meant to be remembered, for the lesson they bring." She nodded, then deleted the message. We went to bed that night feeling something close to peace. Not because the past was gone, but because it had finally been named, faced, and conquered. In the quiet darkness of her room, just before sleep took her, Sana whispered, "Amma, yes, Do you think I'm ready for the wedding? I looked at her, my daughter, my fighter, my heart, and said, you've already won the hardest battle. The rest, that's just celebration. The days after Sana's confrontation at the boutique unfolded like waves rolling in after a storm, quiet, consistent, and cleansing. There was no dramatic aftermath, no outbursts or regrets, just a steady rebuilding of peace that had long eluded us. With every passing day, Sana seemed lighter, more grounded in herself. Her laughter came more easily, her shoulders relaxed, and even the smallest routines, like picking out her mehndi bangles or tasting halwa samples, became joyful instead of burdensome. I watched her with awe, reminded that healing, once truly embraced, has a way of radiating outward and touching every part of life. Wedding preparations surged forward with full force. The invitations had been sent, the venue finalized, the menu reviewed for the 4th time. Sana didn't want any mistakes. She and Amon worked together seamlessly, their partnership not just romantic but deeply respectful. When differences arose, like which Qawwali band to hire or how many cousins to include in the dance performance, they handled them with maturity that made me pause and reflect on how far both had come. It wasn't about winning arguments. It was about building something together, and that quiet strength between them gave me the confidence that my daughter was stepping into a marriage built on real understanding. One evening, as we sipped chai in the courtyard under a lavender dusk sky, Sana brought up something unexpected. Do you remember Mrs. Faiza, my literature teacher from intermediate college? I nodded. Of course, strict but fair. Why, she messaged me yesterday, said she saw my post in her feed. She said she never knew I was being bullied that badly. Her voice was calm, but I sensed a tinge of old pain resurfacing. She apologized for not noticing. She said if she could go back, she'd have paid more attention. That meant something. It should. I said, because silence enables cruelty. It's good she acknowledged it, even if it's late. Sana smiled faintly. I think a lot of people are realizing things a bit too late now. It was true. Since her boutique post went viral, more messages had come pouring in, some from former classmates who had watched silently from the sidelines years ago. Others were strangers, mothers, daughters, teachers, who saw in her strength a reflection of their own suppressed voices. One message from a woman in Islamabad read, I never said anything when my sister was bullied in school. I thought it wasn't my place. Your story made me realize I was wrong. I'm going to talk to her tomorrow for the first time in 10 years. Sana showed me that message with tears in her eyes. Maybe this was meant to happen, she whispered. Maybe all that pain had a purpose. I didn't reply right away. I just reached over and held her hand. As the wedding neared, guests began arriving. The house buzzed with relatives, flower deliveries, last-minute tailoring, and endless laughter. For the first time in years, the walls of our modest home echoed with joy. Not the kind we faked to survive, but the kind we earned. My sister-in-law came from Lahore with her 2 daughters. Sana's childhood friend flew in from Dubai. Even distant cousins we hadn't seen in a decade were suddenly eager to reconnect. And while the old aunties tried to pry into every detail of the wedding expenses, asking if Amon's parents were paying for the venue or whether Sana's lehenga had real zardozi, I smiled politely, amused by their persistence, but didn't let it affect me. There was a time when such gossip would have gnawed at my pride. Not anymore. What did affect me, however, was the surprise visit from my ex-husband. He arrived unannounced on the 3rd day of the wedding week, right before the dalki. He hadn't been part of our lives for years, ever since he left us when Sana was 8. His absence had left scars so deep they rarely came up in conversation, and yet here he was, hair graying, a slight limp, holding a box of mithai with a nervous smile. I heard she's getting married, he said quietly, thought I should, at least say something. I stared at him for a long moment, uncertain whether to close the door or let him in. Sana walked into the hallway behind me, froze, and then blinked in disbelief. Baba, it was the first time I'd heard her use that word in years. He swallowed. You look beautiful, Sana, just like your mother used to. A deep silence settled between them. Then she spoke, calmly yet firmly. "Why are you here? I wanted to see you before your big day," he said, "to say sorry. I know I've missed too much, but I never stopped thinking about you." Her eyes didn't soften. "You missed more than just events. You missed learning who I became." He looked away, ashamed. "You're right." I could feel the air grow thick with unspoken emotions. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She simply said, "You're welcome to attend the wedding, but as a guest, nothing more." He nodded, understanding. "Thank you." She turned and walked away, and as he followed her with his eyes, I saw a flicker of regret in his gaze that looked genuine. But I also knew it changed nothing. Later that night, during the dalki, Sana sang. I hadn't heard her sing in years. Her voice, once shy and guarded, now carried strength and vibrato. The crowd clapped along as she performed the folk song her grandmother used to hum in the kitchen. It was a full-circle moment. 3 generations stitched together in one melody. My heart swelled as I watched her reclaim joy in spaces where she once tiptoed. The next morning, Ammon's mother came by with gifts. She had been nothing but kind throughout the engagement and preparations. A reserved woman with sharp intelligence and a quiet sense of pride, she had taken an immediate liking to Sana. While I had been wary in the beginning, concerned about class difference, expectations, and whether Sana would be respected, I slowly began to see that she genuinely cherished my daughter. Over chai, she leaned toward me and said, "You've raised her well, Meher. I don't say this often, but she's exactly the kind of woman I hoped my son would marry." I smiled. I just gave her space to be who she was meant to be. She nodded thoughtfully. "And still, you gave her more than most mothers ever manage. Your strength is visible in her." That afternoon, we had the rehearsal dinner at Ammon's family home. It was lavish but tasteful. Marigold centerpieces, fairy lights strung from trees, and a long table filled with guests sharing stories. Ammon gave a short toast thanking both families, and then surprised us all by pulling out a gift. It was for me. He handed me a small box. Inside was a pen gold, plated, engraved with the words, "She wrote strength into her daughter's story." I held the pen, stunned, speechless. Around me, people clapped politely, but in my chest, my heart cracked open. I looked at Sana, who had tears in her eyes. "You always said you wanted to write again," she said. "Start with this." That night, I sat at my desk, the same one I had used years ago to write poems I never shared, and opened a new notebook. And for the first time in decades, I wrote. She rose not from privilege, but from persistence. And where silence once lived, she planted courage. I paused, looked at the pen, then wrote one more line, and her daughter danced in that garden. The wedding day dawned with a gentle hush across the city, as if the world itself paused to take in the gravity of the moment. Our house, usually quiet at sunrise, was already abuzz with activity. Soft thumps of feet on the floor, the clinking of breakfast trays, whispered reminders about floral deliveries, all of it humming with the nervous joy only a wedding morning brings. And yet, even amidst the chaos, I found a quiet pocket of stillness inside me. I had made it here. We had made it here. Sana was getting her makeup done in her room, while the stylists fluttered around her like bees. The gold and crimson bridal lehenga was hanging by the window, catching the sun in dazzling shards. It had taken 3 months to stitch, every sequin handpicked by Sana herself. There was meaning in every thread, more than just tradition. This dress wasn't just fabric. It was armor, a celebration, a statement of survival. I walked into the room just as the artist was finishing her eyeliner. Sana turned to me slowly, the tikar resting delicately on her forehead, her smile soft but full of something deeper peace. Not a loud kind of joy, but the deep, settled contentment of a woman who had climbed a mountain and now stood at the summit. "You look like a queen," I whispered. She took my hand. "Because you raised me like one." I helped her with her bangles, adjusting each one carefully, remembering the tiny wrists I used to guide into school uniforms and sweater sleeves. Those same wrists now carried henna patterns shaped like stories, her story. And in the middle of her palm, nestled between the vines, was Ammon's name, barely visible but boldly written. Before we left for the venue, she stood in front of the mirror and said something I would never forget. I used to think today would be the end of a dream, but it's actually the beginning of one I didn't even know I deserved. I fought back tears, kissed her forehead, and said, "You deserve all of it, and more." The wedding venue was nothing short of magical. A historical garden space transformed into a glowing realm of marigold garlands, crystal chandeliers, and soft candlelight. Guests began pouring in, dressed in their finest, smiling, laughing, complimenting the decor, the food, the weather. But I wasn't paying attention to any of that. I was watching my daughter take her place. Ammon arrived first, looking every bit the modern day prince in an ivory sherwani with gold detailing. His eyes searched for Sana the moment he stepped into the hall. He shook hands, posed for pictures, smiled at everyone politely, but only truly lit up when Sana finally entered, guided by her cousins and childhood friend, her dupe Pata shimmering like water under moonlight. The moment their eyes met across the room, something unspoken passed between them. No words, no gestures, just an understanding. We're here, we made it, together. The nikah was simple and serene, with the soft recitation of the imam punctuated by the nods and the solemn repetition of vows. I watched as Sana said Kabul High, with a confidence I could never have imagined back when she was a silent, withdrawn teenager hiding in her books. That girl was gone, and in her place stood a woman who knew exactly who she was and what she was worth. After the ceremony, while guests gathered for dinner and dance performances, I stepped away briefly to the garden's edge for some air. That's when I heard footsteps behind me. I turned and saw my ex-husband again, alone, awkward, holding 2 cups of chai. "I figured you could use one," he said, offering the cup. I took it but didn't say anything. She looked beautiful. He added after a pause, "You've done well, Meher." I finally looked at him. "She's done well, despite everything." He nodded, taking the comment without protest. "I wish I could go back." "You can't," I said flatly, "but you can try to show up now. Not just with gifts and smiles, but with presence. That's what she'll need going forward, if you plan to be part of her life." He looked ashamed, then quietly said, "Thank you for carrying it all, even when I didn't." There wasn't much more to say. We stood there quietly, sipping our chai, watching guests swarm the stage for selfies with the couple. A little later, there was a small surprise planned, a speech, not from me, not from Ammon, but from Sana. She took the microphone, her red dupe, Atta slightly shifted over her head, her posture poised yet relaxed. "I know weddings are usually about celebration," she began, "but tonight, I want to take a moment for something else, gratitude." The crowd fell quiet, sensing the shift in tone. "Thank you to everyone who came, especially those who have stood beside me through every chapter of my life, both the beautiful and the broken ones, and thank you to those who didn't, because without that pain, I wouldn't have discovered the strength I have today." She looked around, making eye contact with different people. Her teachers, her cousins, even her father. But most of all, she said, turning her gaze to me, "Thank you, Amma. You didn't just raise me. You shielded me. You pushed me when I wanted to give up, but also held me when I couldn't go any further. Everything I am today is because you believed I could be more than what the world told me I was." The applause was thunderous, but I didn't clap, I couldn't. My hands were clasped over my mouth, trying to hold back sobs. Eamon wrapped his arm around her waist as she handed the mic back and smiled through her tears. After the speeches and dinner, the dance floor opened. Sana and Ammon led the first slow song, their hands entwined, heads resting gently against each other. And then, as the tempo picked up, the cousins took over, pulling everyone into a joyful, chaotic bhangra. Even I danced, not gracefully, not elegantly, but fully. Just before the night ended, Sana came to me and whispered, "There's something I want to show you." She led me to a corner table where her wedding favors were displayed, small hand, draped boxes with a card inside. She picked one up, handed it to me. Inside the box was a delicate pendant, shaped like an open book, and the card read, "To the women who never gave up, may your stories always find their ending, and may that ending always begin again." I looked at her in amazement. "It's for every woman who has ever been told to stay quiet," she said, "for every girl who survived what I survived." I hugged her tightly, the pendant pressing against my heart. By the time we got home, the city had fallen asleep. Sana and Amon had left for their hotel. The house, once roaring with music and life, was now filled with the soft hum of fans, the scent of roses, and a profound silence. I sat alone in my room, exhausted but alive. I opened the notebook again and wrote, "She walked through fire but left behind no smoke, only light." In the days following the wedding, life returned to its steady rhythm, but nothing felt the same. The house was quieter, but not hollow. It was filled with the echoes of celebration, of healing, of something sacred that had taken place and could never be undone. Every room held a memory now. A corner where Sana and I laughed over spilled Mandy, a windowsill where I cried quietly after hearing her vows, a staircase where my sister-in-law paused and said, "This is how daughters should be raised." I had spent so many years worrying that I had failed my child. Now I realized I had simply done my best, and somehow that had been enough. Sana and Amon left for their honeymoon 2 days after the wedding. Before she left, she came into my room in the early morning light, still wearing her nightshirt and no makeup, her face glowing with peace. "Amma," she said, curling beside me on the bed, "I feel full, like my heart is finally not at war with itself." I held her close. "That's because it isn't." We lay there for a long time, not speaking, just breathing in sync the way we used to when she was little. I thought of all the nights she cried into her pillow, of all the times I stayed awake listening to the silence of her pain, unsure of how to reach her. And now here she was, a woman, a wife, a survivor, cradled against me once more, but not in sorrow, in comfort. After she left, I busied myself with cleaning up the aftermath of the wedding, returning borrowed trays, repacking extra decor, organizing leftover mithai for the neighbors. But in the quiet hours of the evening, I kept returning to my notebook. Writing had become my therapy, my way of stitching together everything we had endured. Each page was a testament to the journey, from betrayal to truth, from silence to speech. People from the wedding still called or messaged, some just to say how beautiful everything was, but others wanted to talk about what really mattered. I received messages from 2 mothers who confided that their daughters had been bullied too, one of whom was now seeking therapy after years of silence. Another message came from a school teacher who had attended as a guest and said she would be more mindful with her students from now on, watching for the subtle signs, the lowered gaze, the forced laughter, the child too quiet for too long. Even Monor's cousin sent a message saying, "I used to hear things about you both in college, but I never knew what was true. After seeing what happened, I'm starting to think I never bothered to find out." It reminded me that justice isn't always about public apologies or dramatic confrontations. Sometimes justice looks like people finally opening their eyes. Sometimes it's quiet, and sometimes it's passed on, like Sana had passed her voice to others who had none. As I sat on the porch one evening, sipping chai, a breeze swept across the yard and rustled the leaves of the old neem tree. For the first time in years, I felt free, not just from pain, but from doubt. My daughter had found her strength, and in doing so, she had returned it to me. We had made it through every storm, not untouched, not without scars, but standing, and perhaps that was the truest kind of happy ending.